If you're thinking about buying a portable sawmill, it could be a Woodland Mills like this, it could be another brand, doesn't matter. This video will be great for you. This is all the things over the last year that I've learned, some things I wish I would have known first. So if you're about to buy one, this video will help you and give you some more things to think about. This is my log arch trailer. This is how I move logs around. Logs are heavy. I'm talking about thousands of pounds in a single log. They're full of water when you first cut them down, so you've got to be able to move them around. I made this thing to be able to pick up heavy logs and move them through the timber. I've got a small tractor with a jib pole and a logging tongs. Maybe you've got a uniloader, something like that. That would work great too. It doesn't matter, but you need equipment, and equipment is expensive. I also made a complete video on how I move logs around the sawmill if you want to watch that. Where are you gonna get your logs? Are you gonna harvest your own logs from your own land, like we do here? Are you gonna buy logs and have them delivered? These factors are gonna determine a lot of different things when owning a sawmill. Once the log is on the sawmill, that's the easy part. That's where the fun really begins. But first, maybe you need to cut a tree down. Or harvest a tree that's on the ground. And that can be really dangerous, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So think about that. Do you really want to be out here cutting trees down or bucking trees? Do you have chainsaws? Do you have that equipment? What I'm standing on here is the trunk of a 70-year-old white oak that we dropped. We dropped it and then we had to buck it, and it was so big and heavy and we got a bit of a hill. I had to call my buddy Kurt, who has a mini excavator, and he helped pull it out of here. But do you know people that can lend you equipment or help you when you get in a pinch? Things to think about. One thing that I wish I would have known, and it took me a while to get this down, is all the prep work that goes before you're ready to actually make a cut. That includes setting up the saw, tensioning the blade, making sure that your belt is tight, all these little things, getting the guide set. They're not difficult, but when you're first starting out, you don't know these things. On top of that, your blade actually matters. There's different types of blade for whatever you're cutting. Are you cutting softwood, hardwood? Is it the middle of winter? Is it frozen? The learning curve to learn all these little things, when I first started out, I kept having little problems and trying to figure out what's going on. Maybe my blade wasn't properly tensioned, my belt was too loose. In fact, the original belt already twisted and then it was junk, so I had to buy more belts. Getting the guides properly on there, and then obviously aligning and flattening out the bed depending on what kind of saw that you have. So what kind of saw do you need? That depends on what kind of wood do you think you're gonna cut, like how big, how long, because this saw here, HM126 by Woodland Mills, I can cut a 26-inch diameter log, and that's it. Anything bigger, I can't put it on here without trimming it up somehow. Woodland Mills makes a HM130, which can do a 30-inch diameter log, and then other brands you can get pretty much whatever you need, or you can make your own even. Matthew Cremona made this freaking crazy electric saw. He can cut like a 4 or 5 foot diameter tree with that thing. So there's all kinds of options out there depending. So if you're thinking about cost, this thing is fully manual. So I push it, I do all the work. They make saws that you basically sit there and it motor drives, it adjusts itself, it even flips the log with a thing. You've got toe boards to lift and raise to get the pith lined up. It's a smaller motor. This is a 14 horsepower. You can get saws with huge motors on them. On top of that, it's got a smaller blade because it's a smaller saw, so the blades are cheaper. So you've got to think about, what's your budget? What are you trying to do? Is this a business? Is this a hobby? Are you trying to build a house or a homestead? That will definitely determine the saw that you want to buy for yourself. One thing that I learned the hard way was dirty logs are no fun. They dull your blade immediately. It's just like when you hit the dirt with a chainsaw, immediately that blade is toast and you've got to resharpen it. I went through about 3 blades cutting a few of these logs before I realized, like, the bark's all dirty. It's been skidded across the mud, and so every time the saw hits that dirt, it's dull, and I gotta put a new blade on there. So make sure that you're doing whatever you need to do to keep the logs clean. Some people will pressure wash them and clean the dirt off. Some people will debark them. And the best thing you can do is never skid it through the dirt in the first place. That's why I built that logging trailer, so I could pick them up off the ground and keep them out of the dirt. That's something to think about, something that I didn't know. It's so simple and obvious now that I am aware of it, but can you keep the logs clean? Because that really does matter. The next thing I want to talk about is actually drying wood and wood movement, which turns out to be one of the biggest, most important things about owning a sawmill. Before that though, if you have any questions about if you should buy one, things you're thinking about or concerned about, or even this Woodland Mills saw in particular that I own, ask in the comments. I love answering these types of questions. Let's talk about wood movement. Another thing that I knew nothing about before buying the sawmill was wood movement. A logging outfit came out and dropped 250 trees. I looked at all this wood like, oh man, I can mill all this stuff up into usable lumber. It's gonna be great. This leftover white oak right here, this is branch wood. They chop the branches off and take the trunk. You cannot mill branch wood up, at least not in long lengths, because the tension in the wood. What I mean is this. When you've got a tree, you've got your trunk, which grows up very straight and tall, generally, and then you've got a branch that sticks off to the side. So that branch is supporting all this tension sideways. It's got gravity pulling on it. So usually what will happen on the bottom side, if you look at the rings inside the tree, the bottom side of that branch is going to be really tight. It's supporting all that weight and tension from gravity, so it's all compressed. And on the top side, the rings are farther apart. Well, what happens if you sit there and you mill that wood into boards is that tension releases and the board will immediately bow and bend. And even if you can get through it and cut it, when it's drying, it'll do the same thing. So what that told me is all this wood that I thought was going to be millable wood, no, this is firewood. You need stickers to dry wood, and you need a lot of stickers. I made the mistake of not cutting my stickers before I started cutting logs. So those original cuts were junk because they started to warp and stuff before I could ever even get them stacked. What these do is actually give you a little bit of an air gap between the logs when they're stacked up, and the air flows through and dries the wood. If you just stack wood right on top of each other, at least most species, you're gonna get mold and the wood's gonna be ruined. You'll have staining, all kinds of problems. So stickers are really important. Not only that, but the type of sticker you use. This is ash, it's a very nice sticker material, but whatever species you're cutting, it kind of depends on what kind of stickers you use. And also when you think about drying, you wanna seal the ends with latex paint, or I use Anchor Seal here, because if you don't, when the wood's drying, it'll actually dry out the ends faster and cause all kinds of cracking and problems. So you seal the ends and then stack it, put spacers in it, cover the top so it doesn't rain on it, and let it sit there until it's dry. And then maybe you need to kiln dry it at the end, which means killing the rest of the bugs that are inside the wood. Also, that'll help get the moisture down to what you want it for selling. So things you gotta think about. Do you have a kiln? Do you wanna pay for a kiln? Are you gonna build one, or are you just gonna air dry everything? The way you set your saw up, there's a lot that goes into that. Where are you gonna put this thing? Which direction are you gonna face it? Are you gonna put it on a base like I've got here? What area of the country do you live in? Right now we got muddy season coming up. It's the end of winter. We've already got mud here in Iowa because it's so warm this year. So that's something we gotta deal with. I need more gravel in here. I need to make this better. One thing that I didn't think about but actually worked in my favor is that direction is west. So when I make a cut and that wind comes out of the southwest, it blows all the sawdust away from me. Every once in a while when the wind's coming out of the east, it's right in my face. So think about that. Are you gonna build a structure to put this thing in? On top of that, how are you gonna get rid of your sawdust and your offcuts? Because that adds up and that's kind of a pain in the butt. So give it a moment to think about how you're gonna set the whole thing up. You know, maybe go out and actually work with someone else that has a sawmill and just see if you like it. Because if you don't like it, don't do it.